Hello there and a very good morning. This is a Newsline. I'm Sonali Vanigabadge. Joining us this morning is the Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka, Asoka Obesekara. Good morning and welcome, Asoka.
Good morning, Sonali.
Thanks for joining us. Asoka,
pleasure.
now the National Audit Bill has come under discussion over the past few weeks, the past few months. Now this was one of the promises of the good governance government. However, the bringing into effect of this act has taken almost 3 years. First of all, as a precursor to this conversation, why is it important that we have a National Audit Act?
Well, under the 19th Amendment, a National Audit Commission had been set up. At the moment, in Sri Lanka, when it comes to the concept of public auditing, we don't have one specific law that governs how public auditing should function. We have different rules regarding how it works for municipal councils, or at all different levels there are a plethora of different rules. The National Audit Bill really brings that all together, but furthermore it goes one step further, because the National Audit Bill also empowers the Auditor General's Department, or the National Audit Office, which is set up by the National Audit Bill, to have surcharging power. Now, when we speak about surcharging power, if someone has been deemed to have wrongfully caused a loss to a state institution, misappropriated funds, be it through corruption or willful negligence, these are things which can be surcharged by the National Audit Office itself. And so when I say surcharge, therefore the loss can be recovered by the Auditor General, as opposed to the Auditor General just having to file a report and then wait for political or bureaucratic buy-in to really action a remedy. Right.
Now, we are told this morning that the AG, the Attorney General, has certified that the draft of the National Audit Bill is in line with the Constitution. This was confirmed to Newsfirst by Attorney General President's Counsel Jayantha Jayasuriya last evening, saying that the certification in this regard has been issued. What are the implications of this?
I mean, it's good to know that there is some progress in that regard. However, I'm not sure, and I'd rather not speculate, but one thing I could say is that I think there is other areas of resistance, as opposed to just looking at the constitutionality of the bill.
Sure.
One side is that at the moment, the Chief Accounting Officer for any public, let's say any ministry, is the Secretary to the Ministry. The moment that the National Audit Bill passes in its current form, it has a very strong, gives very strong powers to the newly formed National Audit Office under the Auditor General.
Right.
And I think there may be a slight issue about territory here. There will be, it would be considered that there is an infringement of the territory of one of bureaucrats, when the Auditor General is empowered to actually have some power of surcharge, which is a sanction. So I think that is a particular area which may potentially be holding up the passage of the bill. That said, though, the fact that the AG's department has certified it is encouraging, because there had also been questions as to raised as to whether surcharging powers were possible or not. So the fact that it's got the AG certificate is very encouraging.
Over the past few months, we've seen a discourse where it was said that there's a dilution of the original draft of this audit bill. What can we really do at this point in time?
Well, I think one main thing, and this is a valuable lesson learned from the passage of the Right to Information Act, is that actually open public consultation is certainly beneficial. At the moment, the National Audit Bill, I've had an opportunity of seeing the draft and an amended draft. But I'm also conscious of the fact that there has been no public discussion on it, and that the drafting process has been a rather sort of closed door. And also, as you probably know, many people have not had an opportunity of seeing that bill at all, and it's not being done in an open way. The idea of having a little bit more public buy-in to the National Audit Bill, even through getting observations of the public, including civil societies, will, on one hand, significantly strengthen the bill. On one hand, will ensure that what is in the bill is implemented, as we're now seeing with the RTI Act, because civil society and other members of the public have a real buy-in to the RTI Act and are really trying to ensure that its implementation is effective. With the National Audit Bill, and if it were to become a National Audit Act, as with all things, implementation will be key.
Sure.
And for implementation to be successful, you need as many people bought into it. So some form of consultation on this bill would be essential. And there are always opportunities of altering and strengthening the bill where necessary, because the bill is still to be tabled in Parliament. So there are still opportunities for this bill to be significantly strengthened.
Asoka, why is it that you think that before an act is brought in, there is very little sort of consultation with the relevant stakeholders? We saw this with several draft bills before this and discussion drafts. For example, most recently, the purported News Media Standards Act first discussion draft, which wasn't really brought before the relevant stakeholders.
Well, what I would say, ultimately, we are now in a situation where we're trying to live up to open government principles with very, for lack of better words, closed government being hardwired into us. Now, I would actually say, on the National Audit Bill, that the bill is actually quite strong. There are areas where maybe it can be tinkered with and strengthened, but we have actually taken a relatively close look at the bill in light of other international auditing principle standards, there's an organization called INTOSAI, which looks at supreme auditing institutions, and actually our National Audit Bill actually addresses many of the issues regarding investigation power, independence, things like that. On this matter of consultation, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, let's say with the media bill, there was I know that there were a few people who had been engaged in island-wide consultation on this particular issue, and many of those people, that include sort of university academics, other people connected to the media.
But not mainstream media.
Sure. So, that's what, consultation can always be better, but it's, I do distinguish between things which have zero consultation and are completely hidden, and other things where at least the bill is produced, and at least, let's say, a mainstream media organization has the opportunity of seeing what's inside the bill and at least bringing it to public attention. At the moment, the National Audit Bill and its contents really are not in the public domain at all. And so I think that is of particular concern. Right.
Let's also talk about the importance of having public awareness about this National Audit Bill. Asoka, why is it that the general public is not concerned about an act which would probably, be governing them, which is of great importance? Why is it? Where does it stem from, the problem, in your opinion?
Well, on one side, Sonali, the National Audit Bill has a bit of a bureaucratic flavor to it when you see it, and the idea that every single member of the public is interested in the nuts and bolts of how public authorities, state institutions are held to account. I think there is a great deal of interest in it, but actually the National Audit Bill hasn't been communicated in that way.
Right.
So for many people, no one has any idea of what the National Audit Bill is about. Now, the Right to Information Act is slightly different, let's say, because the Right to Information Act actually is about a constitutional right to information that every citizen has and how they can actually exercise that right. The National Audit Bill is actually something that's of great interest to a concerned citizen,
Sure.
but the mechanics of it and how it applies to day-to-day life for an individual may not connect in quite that same way. But it is vital when it comes to looking at financial malpractice within public authorities. Hence why it was a part of President Sirisena's 100-day program. So it was given that level of importance. And I think there will come a time where the government has to provide a reason for why something of such importance is now being, not spoken about, not addressed, completely off the table.
If we were to simplify this conversation, and we have a lot of stakeholders watching us right now as well, what are the implications of the Audit Act to, say, corrupt individuals?
So, with corrupt individuals, the National Audit Office under the Attorney General,
the Auditor General,
rather the Auditor General, forgive me, is empowered to surcharge someone for the loss that is caused within a public authority. Now, at the moment, if a loss is caused, and let's say the Auditor General were to identify that, the Auditor General would create a report, table that have that tabled in Parliament, and then it becomes a case of politicians and senior bureaucrats needing to ensure that those findings and that report is enforced. So if anyone wants to see the personal financial accountability of public servants who have, through willful negligence, given rise to a loss for the state, or through corrupt practices, amongst other things, this ensures that can happen without giving people who could potentially even be implicated in the issue being part of the solution to the problem that has been uncovered. I hope that makes it clear.
Yeah, and I hope that makes it clear to any corrupt individuals who, are planning stuff. Let's talk about the corruption discourse that is ongoing in Sri Lanka at the moment. Asoka, it's kind of scary, isn't it?
It is. It is. I think what this indicates is that, when you shuffle a deck, you shouldn't expect different cards. And so even as we've seen with the different elections and everything that we've had, people have come on very different mandates, but all of the people are the same. So to say that we should expect a great deal more beyond the rhetoric, it's easy to say things like this in retrospect. But some of the challenges which have always been there are now being seen now. And I think there are some important steps that need to be taken to ensure that things of this nature and what we're seeing at the moment do not continue repeating themselves. And there are a few simple steps that can be taken to remedy that.
Such as?
One area would be to ensure that asset disclosure of parliamentarians and elected officials and senior public officials are public. Because I have more than half of the entire Parliament's asset declarations in my possession, and I know that if that information is in the public domain, it would have absolutely sweeping consequences. Because it, for the first time, will allow citizens to understand what the people who come before them at elections and everything else are all about. How they make their money, where certain of their interests may lie. Those things become abundantly clear, and lots of people also have a good sense of what their elected officials are supposed to, what they're supposed to be involved in. And when they see their asset declarations, and if for some reason they see that something glaring is not there, these are things that should become a part of the public discussion. At the moment, because these asset disclosures are not in the public, this discussion isn't taking place. Similarly, even on, let's say, declaration of interests, at the moment, and as we've heard with some of the evidence given before the Commission of Inquiry, there is no opportunity for someone to even declare an interest. So at least if they declare an interest, then the public knows about it. And if they fail to declare a material interest, then they can be questioned as to why they didn't declare that interest. And then they can't say, well, I mean, I didn't know that I had to mention it to the public.
So at the moment, there is no mandatory requirement that interests such as those need to be declared?
Indeed. I mean, the idea of, let's say, someone in the private sector making a payment to support someone in public office is a very material interest which the public should know. And if it is declared, there's also a sense that if someone declares something like that, then someone isn't trying to hide something either. But in the absence of that sort of mechanism, you never know, and at every single juncture, there is public mistrust in elected officials,
sure,
because there is no opportunity, because everything seems like a revelation as opposed to it being possible to unilaterally reveal such things.
Right.
So at the moment, asset declarations exist.
Yes.
But they are shrouded in all these secrecy provisions, which mean that even the asset declarations that I have, if I show you, even though you have the right, I am liable to 2,000 rupee fine and or 2 years of rigorous imprisonment. And I know that before Cabinet right now, there is an amendment bill to the Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Act, which has just been forgotten. So that is an important thing, and that amendment bill removes the secrecy provisions. So that's very, very empowering to the public and very progressive, but it's now being forgotten suddenly. And the government has given a commitment to the Open Government Partnership to also make those things public. On the other side, declaration of interest register is not something that has been discussed a great deal, but I think what we're seeing at this very moment in time illustrates the absolute vital importance of something like that being brought up.
Right. You've also campaigned for this whole open government concept. What's that been like?
I mean, it's been a little challenging, but that's not surprising, because ultimately, if you see, let's say, the Establishment Code, the Establishment Code is the central document that public servants are anchored on.
Yeah.
Now, the Establishment Code, in my opinion, is a document which is anchored in closed government.
Sure.
And yet, the public servants who function under the Establishment Code have now been given the responsibility of delivering an open government system.
Yes.
So, needless to say, these are challenges, and anywhere in the world, these sorts of problems are faced. What I would say is that the Right to Information Act is very, very empowering, and some of the information that we've been able to get through the Right to Information Act around political party finances, amongst other things, is very revealing and shows that this right works. However, on the other side of the spectrum, we have things like the Open Government Partnership, where the government has given a whole host of open government commitments. Now, on right to information implementation, the government has done very well. But on other areas, like their commitments on education, regarding teacher recruitment and the transparency of teacher recruitment processes, on matters of their commitments on environment and environmental impact assessments, amongst other things, there really is not the progress that the government had really laid out, and the government has been very clear with their commitments and given deadlines as well on the same. So many of those deadlines have now passed. So we're taking small steps, which I hope are in the right direction. And I think bodies like the Right to Information Commission, amongst others, have important roles to play in really sort of in showing that RTI is about easy access to information for citizens, as opposed to putting challenges before citizens to access information.
It has been over a year since the RTI Act came into effect. What has been your current RTI experience? Well,
I guess the one thing I would say is that it's now been 6 months since the RTI Act has come into effect, but you're right in saying that the Act was passed
in 2016.
A year ago. Yeah. So with 6 months of implementation, it being in effect for 6 months, it is, I think, one of the big challenges is that the idea of formally, when I say formally, actually requesting information through a formal route, using a right, is something which is not something that we're all very well accustomed to. What we're on many occasions, we always are trying to find out how through an informal route we can, speak to someone, get some information. When you actually request information, there's a sense that it is us against them. And I think that is one of the big challenges which needs to be sort of broken down a little bit. And I'm conscious of the fact that even within civil society, there are many who have been strong proponents of RTI, but who now don't want to file RTI requests. And I think civil society has to also lead the way in public interest RTI requests, and also assist citizens in knowing about their right to information as well. And this is where one challenge lies, because actually the state takes no responsibility on the demand side. And I think they should, because it's one thing to pass legislation, but also the idea that the government, and through the state, through the bureaucracy that it controls, actually communicates to citizens that they have a right to information and how they can use it, is also an important area. I mean, civil society can handle that to some degree, but we never have the resources that can actually take that message across the country to all citizens in the way that the state can. So that is sort of one of the challenges that is there.
Right. Asoka, the RTI Commission, have you dealt with that, the Commission as yet, with regard to the requests made, RTI requests made?
Indeed, we are before the Commission at present.
Right.
On one particular issue.
Yeah. Before that, let's briefly tell our viewers the process. Usually when you make an RTI request from a state agency and your request is rejected, you then have an appeal to the designated officer.
Indeed.
After which, if it's still rejected, you can go to the RTI Commission, which is an independent commission, and if your request is still rejected, you can go to the Court of Appeal. Yes.
Indeed. And so from the designated officer to the RTI Commission, you have 2 months to appeal. And we have done that on a couple of occasions. And at the moment, I think it's still early days. And so we have to see how the RTI Commission approaches things. I think one concern is that the RTI Commission needs to be accessible.
Right.
Now, an organization like Transparency International Sri Lanka is acutely aware of the finer points of RTI. But for RTI to be a success, this needs to be something that empowers citizens.
Sure.
And citizens shouldn't be assumed to have prior legal knowledge in detail,
Absolutely.
Things like that. So the RTI Commission must, in that regard, ensure that this doesn't become an overly legalistic process.
Sure.
And I think that's a challenge because, when you have an RTI Act and regulations and everything else. Administering those things generally could runs the risk of gravitating towards an overly legalistic process. So it's about striking that balance between, of being true to the spirit of the law and the regulations, but also in ensuring accessibility and in not dissuading people from coming before the Commission.
Asoka, as the Executive Director of TI Sri Lanka, how, in your opinion, how do you think we can bring in the masses also to be aware of their rights, responsibilities under the existing framework? Because something that we often see is politicians, elected representatives, trying to hoodwink the people at times. And most of the time this works, and it's only a selected number of individuals or organizations or groups that always need to come in and sort of save the day, as it were. But the general public at large remains unaware.
This point about the general public being unaware, I'm not always sure whether that is the case. I mean, let's say on things like, their right to information and how they can use it, okay. Something like that, there is maybe a lack of awareness. And it's only through a sustained effort by the state driving it, but also by civil society organizations, amongst others, trying to get a message out. That's an important aspect to it. But on the other side of it, I'll give you an interesting anecdote, which I haven't come up with myself, but it came up in discussion. If someone is the CEO of a company and they don't take in their son into that company, you and I may turn around and say, my goodness, I mean, that's to that person's credit, I mean, they're showing this level of independence in how they've hired someone. But actually, most people in the country view that as, my goodness, if that person is not looking after his own son, how will he ever look after me? Mm-hmm. So, this idea that the public is unaware, I'm not sure if it's unaware, it's just that public expectations are not may not be exactly what many people assume them to be. And really speaking, are elected officials actually there just to sort of ensure that their patronage structure enables citizens to have recourse? I'm not agreeing with that, but that is maybe what is hardwired in. Okay. So I mean, so this idea of what citizens know and everything else, I mean, citizens have a very clear understanding of what they want, and elected officials have given them that.
I'll give you an example as well. The Umaoya multipurpose project and the concerns raised with regard to not complying with the environmental impact assessment surveys, etc. And we see the physical sort of repercussions of the project before our eyes. This is the kind of example that I'm talking about, Asoka. Yeah.
I mean now those are vital, important issues, and I think, let's say, with something like environmental impact assessments, things like that, it is a complicated area, because now let's say even when an environmental impact assessment is performed, if you develop a reputation as being someone who is difficult or who raises lots of questions when you perform EIAs and the IEEs, the initial whatever IEE stands for, the preliminary investigation, if you develop that sort of reputation, no one comes to you. And so, I mean, these are the sorts of challenges that are faced right across the system, and then who will police the police? These are these are tough questions, and which may be a little difficult to address in the next
30
15
seconds. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Asoko Visekar. I think this was a very productive, constructive discussion. And for all the corrupt individuals watching us, I think they also got the point that with the National Audit Bill now seeing light of day.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see you again tomorrow on another edition of Newsline. Thanks for watching.